Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocates Debate Club. Let's talk a little bit more about abortion. My last video was fairly sloppy, and this one might be as well, but I wanted to follow up on a couple of things I didn't quite finish saying, as well as touch on some news that came to my attention just after I uploaded that video. One of the things I want to talk about is the pendulum effect in politics, where when one side pushes things too far, it tends to swing back just as far to the other side. I think as the dichotomy between the left and the right gets worse, and as I think we're seeing potentially even a third group form in the center, which could be a good thing, we're almost seeing a dual pendulum effect of both sides pushing things farther in their areas, and I think we might start seeing them swing, if we're lucky, towards the middle. Here's why. People on the left recently put forward a couple of bills regarding abortion which allowed for killing babies that had been born, not fetuses, but birthed livable babies. And I think almost no matter where you fall on the moral spectrum, that's taking things just a bit far. Now, there is one argument for it that I've found while playing devil's advocate that I can get into if anyone would like to debate the issue, but overall, I think that's the slippery slope that conservatives of my childhood, who I'd always believed were evil liars, were warning us about. On the other hand, we have the Georgia bill, which I believe a couple of other states have pushed as well, which pushes for abortion to be illegal after there's a heartbeat. Now, this is a very clear emotional point to draw the line at, but there's a reason that we should be using logic over emotion on issues like this. One of them being that you just don't frequently know that you are pregnant within that time period, so unless you're very, very careful about it, which, sure, the religious right are going to argue that you just should be careful anyways, but that's just not always the reality of the youth. And unless you're really careful, you probably aren't going to know that you're pregnant in time, so it effectively outlaws abortion. Well, after this case, there was a young girl who was forcefully taken, shall we say, to protect ourselves slightly from YouTube's algorithm. Not that I think I have to worry too much about it. Well, I don't actually know from the reports I've read whether or not she is pregnant. Under the abortion bill, if she is, could be forced to carry her assaulter's baby to term as an 11-year-old girl, which poses many different physical and, I would think, psychological and potentially even social risks for the girl. It's just not a good situation. It's exactly the kind of reason why I think that there needs to be compromise and nuance on this of all issues. Now, ShoeOnHead, who I really go back and forth with, I don't agree with everything she says. I go back and forth on her content, but overall enjoy watching. So I keep tuning in off and on to her videos. Recently did one about what a centrist really is, which, as someone who considers myself a centrist, of course, was interesting to me, and I agreed with almost everything she said. I really liked the video. She talked about how a centrist isn't someone with views that are in the middle, who's neutral on everything and just screams compromised. A centrist is someone who has views both on the right and on the left. People on both the right and the left tend to say, well, then how can you have a solid moral foundation if, your morals aren't leading you to where mine are? Basically feeling that centrists must be people who don't have morals. It's more that centrists are people whose morals don't come from a religious or identitarian authority, but rather from taking a critical look at the issues. And while I don't say that thinking critically means you'll be a centrist, I do think that critical thinkers end up moderate or centrist. I don't think that too many of them end up in the extremes of either party. Well, the part of her video that I disagreed with, ShoeOnHead that is, was when she brought up abortion as an example of an issue where if you ask a centrist, they'll either say, well, yes, I'm pro-life, or yes, I'm pro-choice. Because this was always the issue that I was most compromisatory. That's not a word. I'm not sure what word I want here, but it was always the issue that I felt was most nuanced and that I was most torn on from a moral standpoint, because when you illegalize it, horrible things tend to happen. But I don't know, for instance, that I could ever morally support the abortion of my own child. I mean, I know that as a man I wouldn't have any say in the decision, and that's a whole nother video to do. However, regardless, if it were a discussion between, me and a girlfriend, and we were having a hard time with finances, weren't sure we could care for the baby, would have to really struggle, and it might be a hard life for the kid, I just couldn't say yes to the abortion. Morally speaking, I am against it. However, I've always and remain for it being legal, because the consequences of illegalizing it have been seen and proven well throughout history. And there are situations, like the little girl, I believe in Georgia, situations that require nuance, that require a critical approach rather than perhaps a concretely defined law. And that's what judges and juries are for. The legal code, as concrete as it is in many terms, was also meant to be somewhat malleable when necessary. And I think that while people on both sides look at this as a concrete issue because of the rhetoric that they use that really radicalizes it for even common people, I think we need to start looking at the nuance of it. So, ShoeOnHead, I disagree with you that abortion is something that centrists will say I'm either pro-life or pro-choice on. I think that this is an issue with a lot of nuance. I agree that on most other issues, if you ask a centrist, how do you feel this way or that on one of the major issues, they would have an answer. And that there are some that require nuance and a centered approach. A centrist is someone who doesn't necessarily look for nuance in everything, but who critically approaches each individual issue. You can end up on the left or right on any specific issue, but there are some where there's compromise needed and where you may well end up in the center. I don't think I've ever met anyone who is, in my opinion, or considered themselves to be a centrist, who was in the center on every issue. Someone who I suppose I would consider to be a neutralist. I don't know that that person exists. I think everyone has issues on the left and or right that a lot of people who post on social media heavily have become party line voters for either the left or the right. Not necessarily Democrats or Republicans. It could be socialists or and don't know if the alt-right has their own party right now. I suppose they probably do. Anyway, to bring things back around, I definitely think a nuanced approach to abortion is needed. The rhetoric, abortion is murder, it's my body, it's my choice, ignores the reality of some of these laws which are being proposed. They're just taking things too far. We need to stop radicalizing. And a lot of radicalization comes from echo chamber mentality. So I try really hard not to be or be in an echo chamber. But a lot of it also just comes from taking an emotional approach on the issues. See, abortion is one of the few issues where I feel both the left and the right approach it almost entirely emotionally. And because it's a very emotionally charged issue, so it makes sense. I just said that word like 4 times in a row, so I'm not going to say it again, even in an example of what I've just done. Anyway, abortion makes people feel like their feelings are more important than the facts. That their religious morals or quote-unquote righteous indignation as a woman or male feminist overrides any of the individual cases or even systemic issues that come with either outlawing abortion or celebrating it. Anyway, I'm not sure if I wrapped up absolutely everything that I'd wanted to from my prior video, but I've said as much as I'm going to on the subject today. It's one I would love to debate from, honestly, either side, because it's an issue that I believe is nuanced, so I can certainly see and debate from or against both perspectives. My next video, unless I'm much mistaken, tomorrow is Mother's Day, will likely be about Mother's Day. Not Mother's Day specifically, but I've been inspired by an old George Carlin quote. I've been rewatching a lot of George Carlin. He's my favorite comedian and is someone who, growing up, I feel I took some of my political leanings and values from, more than just comedic ones. And I was inspired by a quote of his to do a video about, well, the concept of respecting your parents just because they're your parents. And unless something goes much awry, like my phone dying or me sleeping through an alarm, that should be tomorrow's video. Anyway, thanks for watching. I think this one was a little bit better on topic than the last. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, but more importantly, start a discussion on the topic below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. As always, I'm your host, Cipher. Thank you for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club.